would love to do 10. No problem. All right, Bob, ready? All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, Bob. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody. Bob Pisani on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. Hello, Facebook friends. Hello, Twitter friends. Hello, YouTube friends. And hello, Instagram friends as well. Let's start today discussion about why we dropped in the middle of the day. We dropped 380 points in the Dow or so in the middle of the day, a little after 11 o'clock Eastern time. There's a big what we call sell program coming. What's a sell program? It's when all of a sudden people decide to simply lighten up on their positions and they start selling holdings. The typical way this will happen is to sell S&P futures. That's the most liquid thing out there. And we saw quite a bit of volume in S&P futures a little after 11 o'clock Eastern time. What weakened the most is stuff that would make some sense. We've had some ridiculous moves up in some of these, what we call momentum names, semiconductor names. Microsoft's been really strong this year. We know about Tesla. You know about Virgin Galactic, which has become the Tesla of 2020. All of those dropped rather quickly, and that suggests that there were people who were sitting on some significant profits in the last few weeks that just decided, for whatever reason, that essentially we're going to lighten up a little. That may make a lot of sense. Remember, we have not figured out what's going on with coronavirus yet. It is true the Chinese government is reporting fewer new cases than there were before, but we've had a few deaths already outside of China, and it's not entirely clear if the global epidemic is really truly contained in China itself for the most part. We don't know, and we are still waiting to find out if, in fact, it can spread beyond China. So there's a lot of unknowns out there, and the market is acting like this is a one-quarter event. We're all going to bounce back very quickly. On the other hand, this may not be a one-quarter event. This may be going on for a couple of months, in which case there will be a much greater impact to the global economy. Well, the bulls seem quite happy about this, too, because they say, well, if that happens, all of the global central banks and everybody will enact more stimulus programs, keep lowering rates, and we'll get it out of the get out of the rut eventually. So think of this logic. If things are only short-term with coronavirus, oh, good news for the markets. If this is a longer-term problem for the global economy, don't worry. Central banks are going to come to the rescue. So you win either way at the equity markets. That doesn't make a lot of sense necessarily, and it's a little bit risky, and I think some people are starting to understand the implications of that. At the same time, we have markets at new highs, but you have these safe haven plays. You have gold at a new high. You have the dollar at a new high. You have very low bond yields. You have utilities at new highs. You see the point? The overall market's at a new high, but a lot of people who've got safe assets, safe haven assets also at a new high. It doesn't really make a lot of sense right now. So today's sell-off, somebody came in and said, I think I'm going to take a little money off the table, made some sense. Hannah, what else do we have?
Great. How is coronavirus impacting the markets, specifically in Asia?
How is coronavirus impacting the markets? Well, every day we're seeing companies come out and say, this is going to impact our earnings in the first quarter. So Procter & Gamble came out and said that today. Tenneco, which makes auto parts, came out and said that. Maersk, which is the big global shipping company, they ship all the stuff around the world. All these goods that we get from China, Maersk ships. They said the same thing. Norwegian Cruise Line, no surprise, they said the same thing. So companies are slowly coming out making comments, and there's clearly some kind of some impact. We just don't know the extent of it yet. Hannah?
All right. Which sectors are seeing the biggest impacts?
Sectors that see the biggest impact. Well, think about the world as an interconnected place. So we have what it called global supply chain. So think about it, the iPhone. The iPhone is assembled in China, but the parts are made all over the world. So if you have a problem, for example, and you're a Chinese manufacturer, you're a company like Tenneco, and you make auto parts, and the parts are made in China, but they're sold all over the world. If there aren't any workers in China making the parts, Tenneco can't get hold of the stuff they need to sell. So there's what's called supply chain disruption. And that's really what's going on here. So you have Tenneco doing that. We see semiconductor stocks hit, auto parts companies hit, companies that make phones, for example, hit. This is that supply chain. And it's good to remind everyone that despite trade wars, the world is still very, very interconnected. What else?
Will we see coronavirus in Q2 earnings reports?
Will we see coronavirus in Q2 earnings reports? Well, it's showing up already in Q1, and I suspect it will show up in Q2. So, for example, for the first quarter on the S&P, it was estimated earnings would be up about 4.9% just a couple of weeks ago, and now it's down in the low 3% numbers. Now, the number will typically drop as we're in the quarter a little bit, but this is a little more aggressive, and this obviously suggests an impact from coronavirus. We're not hearing comments about Q2 yet, but I would anticipate that we'll see that as well. Again, the question is one of degree. There's no doubt it's going to impact earnings. The question is how much and whether it will bounce back in the second half of the year. Hannah?
Okay, how are the space stocks like Virgin impacting the sector?
Yeah, Virgin Galactic, we call it the Tesla of 2020. The investing public goes through thematic fits where all of a sudden something's hot. Remember pot ETFs last year, pot stocks? Was there a lot of reason for that unnecessarily? Not really. This year there's a very interesting interest in space, but for very good reason. Elon Musk has almost single-handedly reinvented interest in space with Tesla. They're thinking about doing a deal with an IPO of their Tesla satellite system, potentially. And Virgin Galactic, which is doing space tourism, has captured the public imagination. Satellite companies have also been really big because those are the means by which you transmit all this data around the world. So if you control the satellites that are out there, you're going to control a lot of the data that goes around the world. So there's been a big interest in space this year. This is one of these themes that the public has caught on to, and I think there's good reason for that. One of the problems, though, is there's not a lot to invest in. It's the same problem we had with Bitcoin a few years ago. Everyone was interested, but there wasn't a lot to invest in. We also have continued interest in other thematic interests, for example, like disruptive technology. Still a lot of interest in robotics, still a lot of interest in genetics, still a lot of interest in specialty things like lithium, which is used for batteries in the electric cars. That's tied to Tesla as well. So these are what I call thematic ideas, and sometimes there's very good reason to be hot on them. I think there is for space. The problem, just not a lot to invest in right now. What else?
All right, last question. How's the 2020 election?
How's the 2020 elections affecting things? Well, despite the fireworks last night at the Democratic debate, not a lot. I would not necessarily attribute any of this action today to any concerns about the Democratic debate last night. Now, the market basically seems to be betting that it's unlikely Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren are going to be the nominees, despite the fact that Bernie Sanders is the current front runner. I think if that became more obvious later on, there might be some more concern in the markets, and indeed, that would make a lot of sense to me if that was the issue. There are other people who are saying, well, if Bernie Sanders, that almost guarantees that President Trump will have a much easier path to re-election than if a more moderate candidate. So there's different opinions about this. What I can say is we don't see a huge impact from the elections yet on the market, but that could change very quickly. That's it from here. I'm Bob Pisani down on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. Everybody have a healthy, happy, and safe trading day.
Thank you so much. That was great. All good?
Okay.
All good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the help.